What's up, everyone? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 15 of the Patel Kumar Show. I'm your host, Shivam Patel, coming to you live from San Antonio, Texas. And my co host, Mr. Kumar, coming to you live from Mumbai, India. Good evening to the Indian audience. Good morning to the audience here in the US. We are at the conference finals, Mr. Kumar. We got two very intriguing matchups. We're going to break it down here, give our predictions. We have so much to talk about today. And also, we're going to be debuting some new segments, Mr. Kumar. But first of all, how are you?
Hey, thanks a lot. I am doing great. And namaste to you, Mr. Patel. As you said, a very good morning to all our viewers from the US, and a very, very good evening to all our viewers from India. But what an exciting week it is. The unexpected is happening all around the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks, the Phoenix Suns, and you never know. We're going to probably get a champion who's never won the trophy before. And looks like it from the four teams who have qualified for the conference finals. So we're going to be recapping some of the games of round two. Then, of course, the conference finals between and from the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. And as my friend mentioned, we're going to have some new segments where we're going to do some powwow with Mr. Patel.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see me and Mr. Kumar go back and forth. You can in our Maha Youth section, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And also, we have another segment, Shivam stat attack. So I'm going to be giving you a little stat that we're going to be talking about, and also our last section, the blame game. So here in the U.S., Mr. Kumar, when something goes wrong, people like to point the finger. So me and Mr. Kumar will be pointing the finger. Who's to blame for the Sixers' loss, and who's to blame for the Nets loss? But thank you, audience, for watching. Please put your questions and comments in the chat section below, and they may be featured live on the show. But are you ready, Mr. Kumar?
I was born ready, Mr. Patel.
All right, Dad, shout out to you. He said, so excited, man. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the comment. But yeah, let's get to it, Mr. Kumar. So first of all, let's recap, the second round, of the playoffs. Of course, the Sixers ended up losing to the Atlanta Hawks, which was very surprising. Nobody saw that coming. Like Mr. Kumar said, they're the Cinderella team. They're, the fifth seed, in the East. But then the other Eastern Conference second round matchup, the Bucks against the Nets. Yeah, the Bucks beat my Brooklyn Nets, unfortunately. But yeah, congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning that series in Game 7. So what a great second round Eastern Conference matchups, that we had. Other than the Western Conference, the Clippers ended up beating, the Utah Jazz. Other than the Suns ended up getting the broom out and sweeping the Denver Nuggets.
Oh, it is a totally unexpected result in the Eastern Conference, starting with the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Of course, I mean, we've all heard about, them coming back from a 26-point deficit in that game 5, I suppose, where, I mean, it was unheard of in playoff history. And at the end of the day, it's Atlanta Hawks who are in the conference finals. The totally unexpected team, and Trae Young,
Ice Trae.
Yeah, Ice Trae, man, he's been unbelievable, Mr. Kumar. And yes, the Sixers, Joel Embiid wasn't right, but still, the Sixers really struggled, with Ben Simmons. They did a hack of Ben, and he just completely went south mentally. He wouldn't even shoot the ball. There was a play in Game 7 where he literally had a wide open dunk, Mr. Kumar, and he passed the ball to Matisse Thybulle. It was just like, that's when you knew that was a sign that, okay, the Sixers are done. And Joel Embiid was outside shooting jump shots instead of, taking Clint Capella in the paint. The Sixers shooters were really struggling. They really miss Danny Green, Mr. Kumar, because not only for shooting ability, but his, veteran leadership ability, because he's won multiple championships with the Spurs, one with the Lakers. So I think Danny Green was a big missing piece, but it was just a struggle for the Sixers. They have a lot of offseason questions, but the Hawks were just the better team in this series.
The Hawks have been doing this, for 2 series. The first one against the New York Knicks, they were not expected to win that series. They were definitely not expected to win the series against the Philadelphia 76ers. and the way the team has been constructed for the Atlanta Hawks, I think you got to give props to Nate McMillan. He took over as the interim coach mid-season, and he's turned around this team, and they're high on confidence. And he's given the license to Trae Young to basically go out there and do his stuff, and he's been doing his stuff. Except for that game 7 where he actually only shot 5 of 23, and still they managed to beat the Philadelphia 76ers. So I think more than the Atlanta Hawks winning that series, I think the Philadelphia 76ers lost that series.
Yes.
But you got to give credit to Atlanta Hawks. I mean, it's been an unbelievable run for them, and they won. They also won the game, first game at Milwaukee. Milwaukee hadn't lost a game yet in these playoffs at home. So so it was definitely something that the Atlanta Hawks are going to take away from this because they're up 1-0 in that conference final series as well. But I mean, Trae Young, man, it's emergence of some young players in this year's NBA with Devin Booker, even Ja Morant had a decent outing in his first playoff appearance against the Utah Jazz. But it's Luka Doncic, but Trae Young, man, he's hot. He's hot right now, and it's all a mindset, I think, right now with Trae Young. I mean, he can just he's so full of confidence that he can do whatever he wants, and he's basically commanding that team over their opponents.
Yeah, he's playing with the swagger. You can just tell in his confidence that he thinks every shot's going to go in. He's confident. He's trusting his teammates. That's really important because Trae Young is not only getting his, but in the Sixers series, Capello played well. John Collins played well. Gallinari had a great series. So it's the others also, for the Hawks. Herter had an amazing game 7, and they're missing 2 important pieces. Bogdanovic is not the same. But I think he's the key player for the Hawks. He's their X factor. When Bogdanovic plays well, then the Hawks are even tougher to beat. Of course we know DeAndre Hunter, their defensive stud, is out for the series, so they're doing this short-handed, and they're doing it with a balanced scoring effort, Mr. Kumar. And I think that's really important. And just one more thing I want to say about the Sixers before we officially put them to bed in this segment. But the Sixers, Mr. Kumar, they were a top 5 team in defensive efficiency during the year. Against the Hawks, they were atrocious defensively. Trae Young could get whatever he wants. They were allowing straight line drives to the basket, wide open threes. So the Hawks were basically allowed to have a shooting clinic. And I think that was a big reason that the Atlanta Hawks were able to prevail over the Sixers. And like we said, the Hawks have won all 3 game 1s against the Knicks, like Mr. Kumar said, against the Sixers, and then against the Bucks. Well, we have to start asking the question, Mr. Kumar. Aiden and Trae Young were drafted before Luka Doncic, and hey, they're still playing, and Luka Doncic is back home. So, what a stacked draft that 2018 draft was, Mr. Kumar.
Absolutely, and to talk a little bit more about the 76ers, I think the only consistent performer for them has been Joel Embiid, even though he's playing a little bit handicapped with that torn meniscus.
Yeah.
Tobias Harris, who's making $33 million, he's been a no-show and inconsistent throughout the series. Of course, Ben Simmons, he's been the most talked about, basketball star in the past week. And of course, the absence of Danny Green. Seth Curry has been, relatively good for the 76ers. But I think, the way the team has been constructed, we always expected them to probably be a little bit better, at least reach the conference finals.
Because this was the best year to win a championship, and they didn't,
So it is going back to the drawing board for Daryl Morey. The team hasn't changed much mentally from the way they were with Brett Brown as the coach. They're in the same place. I don't know if Doc Rivers can do something different to this team, but he definitely needs to have a big talk with their star point guard, which is Ben Simmons, and maybe get him to improve his shooting, improve him mentally. That's what he needs right now. I think he needs a little bit of encouragement. He needs a little bit of somebody to talk to right now. And hey, you never know. Rich Paul is his agent. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see him in a Laker uniform.
Oh man, do you really want him, Mr. Kumar? Do you really want a guy that has broken confidence and really can't shoot?
No, see, I mean, I totally understand his handicap in terms of he cannot. I mean, it's not like he cannot shoot. Of course, he cannot shoot, but he's great from inside the paint. He can actually drive in. He's 6'9". He has long arms. He's great defensively. I think it'll work wonders if he has a mentor like LeBron James, because LeBron James, probably has the ability to probably kind of coach him and get his confidence up. I mean, I'm just trying to give you an example of what kind of a mentor he needs in a team. I know Joel Embiid is a great player, but I really don't think he's at a place where he can mentally elevate the players surrounded by him.
Yeah, and right now he's really handicapping the Sixers. And Joel Embiid is 26, but he's injury prone and he's in his prime. So these are important years for the Sixers and for Joel Embiid's legacy. Or he could come to the Spurs, Mr. Kumar. We have the best shooting coach, Chip England. He can revamp his shot, teach him how to shoot. Spurs need a point guard. DeJounte Murray's. I think Ben is a little bit of a better player, but hey, we'll see about that. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers. But on the other matchup in the second round of the Eastern Conference, the Brooklyn Nets against the Milwaukee Bucks. Unfortunately, the Bucks beat the Brooklyn Nets in 7 games. What a game 7 that was, Mr. Kumar, on both sides. The shot making, the drama, the back and forth, the two overtimes, or the one overtime, excuse me. But what an exciting game 7 that was between the Nets and the Bucks.
Absolutely. Just a 1-inch disaster. That's what you call that game.
You needed a smaller shoe size. If Kevin Durant wore a half-size smaller shoe, the Nets would have won. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about luck at this point in time. I think, he did the right play. I mean, the ball was in his hands. He pretty much elevated and shot the ball. But, you could see in his face as soon as he shot the ball and it was given as a 2-pointer instead of a 3-point. It was. I mean, he had spent all his energy, and it was such a tough overtime. I mean, I think the Bucks had like 2 field goals, and the Brooklyn Nets had just 1 field goal, and that's how the whole overtime went. You got to give props to Giannis with that nice little sky hook. And of course, you got to give props to Chris Middleton as well, making those shots. But I just feel a little bit sad for Kevin Durant. He did all the right things, but his team ended up on the losing side. And I think they will go and look back on this season, and hopefully, the trial that we would all like to see on the court. More often than seldom what happened this season. I think it's going to be an interesting season next year.
And I don't want to hear about Kevin Durant cannot carry a team. He definitely can. In Game 5 he was amazing. Put the Brooklyn Nets on his back, won the game. Game 6 he had a great game, but unfortunately the Bucks were just too hard to beat. We actually did a watch party for Game 6, so. That was pretty fun. But Game 7, Kevin Durant did all he could do. He was scoring at all 3 levels, attacking the basket, mid-range, from 3, going to the free throw line. He had like 49 points, Mr. Kumar. Joe Harris just needed to make just one shot, that wide open shot, Mr. Kumar, with 40 seconds left. If Joe Harris made that, he would have put the Brooklyn Nets up by 2. It would have not guaranteed that they would have won, but it would have been another step. And then Jeff Green only playing 13 minutes, Mr. Kumar, after he scored 27 points in Game 5. That was a head scratcher. I thought Steve Nash should have at least played Nicholas Claxton a little bit more because Lopez was killing them on the board. So he should have played a little bit more. So Steve Nash's rotations were a little bit questionable there, but Kevin Durant just needed one other guy. James Harden just had no lift on his shot. All his threes were just wide left, wide right, short. He was not playing with confidence. That last shot was designed for James Harden. But as soon as James Harden got the ball, he was like, okay, I don't want this. I'm going to give it back to Kevin Durant in overtime. So if they just had one other role player step up and play, just make one or two shots. That's all the Nets needed. And at home, it was just disappointing. The Nets defense could have been a little bit better. They were not doubling Giannis. I think they played Giannis too much one-on-one, which was a mistake. Because you want to force the Bucks role players to beat you. I thought they overreacted a little bit, to Brook Lopez a little bit. So I think that the Nets just made some fundamental mistakes, but this is a learning experience for them. And Kevin Durant did all he could, but it just came up a little bit short.
Yeah, I mentioned right at the beginning of this discussion, the margin was 1 inch. That's how closely fought the series was. I think both teams had their moments throughout the series, but at the end, as you mentioned, Kevin Durant was a little bit without support on the field, and the way the Nets roster is, I think they will have to make a little bit of improvement with their role players. I think the dependence on the trio is immense, and you really don't have a very good bench strength. Blake Griffin, he was a short-term rental after he got waived by the Detroit Pistons. So is I think Jeff Green. So there are going to be a lot of free agents at the end of the season, apart from this Joe Harris, who had, he was the number one 3-point shooter in the regular season, and he was a no-show during the entire postseason.
So disappointing. Yeah, it was so disappointing.
So yes, I mean, Steve Nash also a little bit inexperienced, I would say, as a coach. He did not make the right moves. Even in that game 7, maybe he should have called the timeout as soon as the Nets got the rebound. Maybe give a breather to Kevin Durant, drop a play or something along those lines. But they had a timeout left, and but it's a sad ending for for a team which was expected to probably win the championship. But I think everybody had apprehensions right from the beginning of the season, when the trio only played like 7 or 8 games during the regular season. So they got to figure it out next season as well. So let's hope. It'll be an interesting season for the Brooklyn Nets next year.
It will be. And I have a stat about Joe Harris. I saw the stat. Earlier in this series, in the entire Bucks Nets series, Joe Harris shot 24% from 3. Giannis in the Bucks Nets series shot 26% from 3. So technically, Giannis shot a better 3-point percentage than the 3-point marksman Joe Harris. But
again, I think he shot almost 48% from 3 during the regular season.
Yeah, he was a leader. Exactly. He was the leader in the regular season. He even won a 3-point shootout. So Joe Harris is no scrub. He's a great 3-point shooter. What also was disappointing me about the Nets, Mr. Kumar, is they let the offense dictate their defense. So those role players, I think they felt like they weren't getting the ball enough, or they weren't making the shots. So they were struggling on defense. The Bucks had a lot of straight line drives to the basket. Giannis was just getting whatever he wanted. I have to give credit to the Bucks, Mr. Kumar. Giannis had an attack first mentality. Yes, he did shoot 2 threes, but in the fourth quarter and overtime, attack. Get to the basket. When he attacked, he drew the defense in. He kicked it out to Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton. Props to them. They were struggling the entire game. When it looked like the Nets might pull away, they were making some huge shots. Brook Lopez made a huge shot. Pat Connaughton. So the Bucks role players stepped up. The Nets role players did not. So congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks. What a big win. It's not easy to win a game 7 on the road, Mr. Kumar. And I liked it also. They were attacking Harden on defense. Harden was still playing on one leg. They were forcing him to work on the defensive end, which took away his legs on the offensive end. So great game plan by the Bucks.
So let's move on to the Western Conference recap, because I think we'll be short on time because we have a few new segments that we want to introduce during the later part of the show. So everyone be tuned in, because we have quite a few new segments where me and Mr. Patel will be going at it. We'll be barking at each other. So if you have any comments, please, do tune in. Comment on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. But once again, subscribe to our YouTube channels, Ekalavyas and Patel Pick and Hold Sports, because that's where we are, every Thursday at 7 p.m. But Western
Yeah,
Conference, I
Western
think we
Conference.
already discussed the Denver and Phoenix, which was long done and
There's
dusted.
not much to
Phoenix
discuss
and
about that. It
yeah,
was
but
one-sided.
I think uh, the Clippers rose from the graves after, in two consecutive playoffs. They're down 2-0 with the Dallas Mavericks. They were down 2-0 with the Utah Jazz as well. But I think I did, advocate for Quinn Snyder to be the coach of the year after taking the #1 ranking, and I got to stand corrected because I think it was a poor coaching job done by Quinn Snyder in terms of losing that game 6, and game 5 after having commanding leads in both those games.
It was a mistake by the Jazz. I'll give my analysis pretty quickly, but it was a mistake by the Jazz. They were living too much by the three. They were jacking up too many bad shots. When they could have attacked the basket, went in the mid range. Their defense wasn't the best. I think they let Rudy Gobert hang out too much in the perimeter, and he doesn't have the quickest feet. So all the Clippers just did was just attack him, and just blew right past him. I think they put him in uncomfortable situations. So I think that was something Quinn Snyder could have done a little bit better. And I think they were a little bit too reliant on Donovan Mitchell. His usage rate was crazy in this series. There was too much isolation rather than the ball movement that allowed them to get the #1 seed, during the season, when they could have trusted their other players like Bogdanovich and Clarkson, and Mike Conley when he was kind of hobbled. So I think those were a little bit small mistakes by the Utah Jazz. But congratulations to the Clippers, man! What a series by Paul George! What a series by Kawhi Leonard. Marcus Morris rose from the dead. He played really well. Terrence Mann, Mr. Kumar, Reggie Jackson, man, they went crazy in Game 6. So Clippers, just had too much scoring ability that the Jazz could not match, and that's why they were able to win this series.
Yeah, I had picked the Utah Jazz after going 2-0, but
I picked the Clippers.
but I really thought they had the upper hand. And as I mentioned, they were leading by quite a big margin in Game 5 and Game 6. But you got to give a little bit of props to Pandemic P, who converted himself to playoff P, and he carried the team without Kawhi Leonard. And this team wasn't expected to win without Kawhi Leonard. But I think, to be frank, this team has better ball movement without Kawhi Leonard in the lineup.
And they're a little bit better defensively. They're able to rotate more. I think they play more free offensively, because they know they're going to get their touches, and it's going to be more spread around the wealth. And they play a little bit faster, up and down pace than without Kawhi Leonard. So I think there's definitely, true. And I think congratulations to the Clippers, but now they're in a dogfight, down 0-2 again, to the Phoenix Suns. But Mr. Kumar, before we break our new segments, let's quickly talk about our predictions for the conference finals. So I know everybody, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to get involved in this conversation. What are your predictions for the conference finals? Who's going to win? What are your comments? Put that all in the chat section below. But Mr. Kumar, what is your Eastern Conference Finals prediction?
I still pick the Bucks. I think the Bucks are better defensively. I think the first game was a little bit of an aberration. I think Jrue Holiday played a great game. So did Giannis. But it was a a superlative performance by Trae Young that got them to that win by a whisker, I would say. But I still pick the Milwaukee Bucks to win in 6 games.
So I picked the Milwaukee Bucks to win in 7 games. Milwaukee has come back before, from deficits. But Milwaukee needs to make some adjustments. I'll go through it really quickly. Their coverage on the pick and roll, they're playing that drop coverage where when Trae Young's come on the pick and roll, Brook Lopez is basically getting the paint. So that allows Trae Young, to get his 3-pointer, to get his floater. And then when Jrue Holiday tried to fight over the screen, Trae Young would hit him with a crossover 3-point shot. So I think the Bucks need a trap and blitz the pick and roll, get the ball out of Trae Young's hand, force the others to beat them. You would rather let the others beat them and than not Trae Young. So they need to make that adjustment. I think that's important. But I think the Bucks are going to win in 7 games.
Yeah, and coming to the Western Conference, it's already 2-0 for the Suns, and what an ending it was. Game 2, a great play drawn up by Monty Williams, giving an alley-oop to DeAndre Ayton, who managed to put that basket in that final microsecond. But what a controversy! 3 or 4 minutes. There were so many reviews. There were so many.
It took 33 minutes to play the last minute and a half, ladies and gentlemen. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I just don't think the Clippers have the energy to beat this confident, fast, and a team talent Phoenix Suns.
And
I think they're going to win in 5 games. The only reason being is that they have great role players. They have great support from the bench, and Monty Williams has been more like a chess player this entire postseason. He's able to read the opponents and make adjustments much better than the other coaches.
Yeah, Monty Williams is playing chess. The other coaches are playing checkers. Yep, that's true. It's been that way the entire playoffs. DeAndre Ayton is the X factor, Mr. Kumar. When he plays well, takes the Suns team to a whole nother level. They could throw it to him in the post. He even has a nice mid-range shot, 10 to 12 feet. It's money. He gets rebounds, plays great defense. He's everything for them. And Chris Paul, ladies and gentlemen, is coming back in Game 3. So that's going to allow Devin Booker to be off the ball in his natural 2-guard position. So he's going to be able to come off screens rather than having to initiate the offense. So I think that's going to be key for them. And the role players, Bridges, Aiden, Jay Crowder, Cameron Payne, Mr. Kumar. He's been a pain to his opponents. 29 points. What a performance. So I think the Suns are going to win in 6 games. I think the Clippers are going to take care of business at home like they have been before, but I think the Suns are a whole different animal, and the Suns are going to take it over and win the series in 6 games.
So let's hope so. So let's move on. I guess. But are we? We also had those polls going on, right? So maybe we can show the results of the polls.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So we asked just before we get on to our new segment. So we asked who was going to win, between the Suns and the Clippers, and it looks like I believe a majority of the audience picked the Suns to win. I don't remember the exact percentage, Mr. Kumar, but I believe that. And then the Hawks and the Bucks, I believe the audience picked the Bucks. Yeah, 75%. Oh, yeah, 75% for the Suns, 25% for the Clippers. Me and Mr. Kumar are in the 75% percentile. Then for the Hawks and the Bucks, I believe most of the audience did pick the Milwaukee Bucks, to win the series.
Yeah, I think most of them picked their Hawks opponents in the previous 2 series as well, and they're one game up, and they've beaten the Bucks at home. But yeah, it's 72-28. But you cannot write off the Atlanta Hawks the way they have been performing this postseason.
For sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the blame game. So this is a new segment where after every series, me and Mr. Kumar point the finger. Who is to blame for the loss? In the U.S., again, like I said, we love to point the finger and blame, who when we lose and when we come up short. So let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, Mr. Kumar. So they lost in heartbreaking fashion in Game 7 to the Atlanta Hawks. So who does Mr. Kumar point the finger to and blame for the Sixers' loss?
Hey, I think I got to point fingers. I got to point fingers. I mean, you just can't blame one person for this loss. I think everybody is going to, I think the whole of Philadelphia is going to point a finger at Ben Simmons. But we knew right from the start that Ben Simmons is not a consistent scorer. Yes, he does get you between 15 and 20 points, about 10, 12 assists. and at least about 7 or 8 rebounds every game. He's been consistent with that in the past 2 seasons. But uh, I just don't think Ben Simmons is the. I would point a finger at uh, Doc Rivers. I would point a finger at Joel Embiid, and I would point a finger at Tobias Harris. I think uh, Doc Rivers, because he hasn't elevated from the previous seasons. Uh, with Joel Embiid, I think he has not been aggressive enough when he needs to be. He's shown you that he can get you 40 points. He can get you those 15 rebounds. He can get you a couple of blocks. But he wasn't the same in those, final 2 games. And Tobias Harris, I mean, he's making, almost a max contract. He's a max contract player, an all-star, but he's been a no-show. So I think I would blame these 3 people instead of just Ben Simmons. Yes, Ben Simmons, he needs to improve his shooting, his mental ability to take the shot, but he has the capability to go drive in and get those buckets. But I think the problem with him is mentally he's not ready to take those free throws, and that's why he doesn't want to go in and dominate inside the paint.
All right, so I heard you, Mr. Kumar. I'm going to give a percentage. So I blame 60% on Ben Simmons, 20% on Doc Rivers, and 10% on Joel Embiid. And yeah, first of all, Ben Simmons, Mr. Kumar pretty much hit all the points. You're being paid, max contract, $30 million. You're the second star on the Sixers. You have to be aggressive. You have to go shoot free throws. You have to go to the line. You have to be able to score. And when Joel Embiid is struggling, he just didn't have that ability. He was just yes, he does a lot of great things like passing and defense, but I think his lack of aggression really affected those areas. So I have to give him 60% of the blame. Doc Rivers 20% of the blame because he gave up a 26-point lead in one game, an 18-point lead in another game. He can't keep the leads, Mr. Kumar. He's given up a 3-1 lead before. Since that long ago championship with the Boston Celtics, he hasn't made it out of the second round of the playoffs. So, he needs to, look himself in the mirror and figure out what he needs to do better, what buttons he needs to push, and better coaching style, for these players. 10% Embiid because game 6 and game 7, he had 8 turnovers in game 6, 8 turnovers in game 7, 16 total. That was another big problem for the Sixers. He could dominate Clint Capella. I know he had the partially torn meniscus, okay? But that's an injury you can play through. Yes, it's going to hurt at times, but he needs to, be able to suck it up, go attack Clint Capella, get him in foul trouble. Because after Clint Capella, Mr. Kumar, you're playing a rookie. The Hawks have a rookie backup to Clint Capella. So you need to get Clint Capella out of the game, get him in foul trouble, force that double team, and kick it out to the shooters. And Joel Embiid didn't do enough of that. He was too, relying on the 3-point shot. So the last 10% has to go towards Joel Embiid for the blame.
Well, I mean, again, agree on all those points. But I think Doc Rivers as a coach needs to probably hire a sports psychologist as his assistant coach rather than somebody who is great offensively or defensively or make plays or get all those stuff in. Because I really feel when he was a coach of the Boston Celtics, he had players who were mentally tough. He had Kevin Garnett, he had Ray Allen, he had Rondo. These guys were mentally tough. When you look back at the Clippers last season, again, they were expected to win, but mentally, you would say, Paul George agreed with that, was they weren't mentally ready for the bubble, So again, it's all boils down to the mental aspects of the game. And the same thing happened with the Philadelphia 76ers. Mentally, they aren't tough to make comebacks, to make the opponents pay. I think Doc Rivers is a great coach. He knows what he's doing, but I don't think he can elevate players mentally when the going gets tough.
Yeah, exactly. When the going gets, I think you make a great point. When the going gets tough, you see Doc Rivers teams fold. Well, he needs to figure out what's the root cause for that. I think he needs to know his players a little bit better, his personnel, put them in the right spots. I think for winning, for Ben Simmons, maybe you could have, put him in the post, because he's more comfortable there. I don't know. Joel Embiid, you could have just, ran a couple more plays for him. Tobias Harris, when Joel Embiid was struggling, in Game 7, I thought they should have directed the offense a little bit more towards Tobias Harris because he was just standing there in the corner, just like waiting. I think he could have involved him a little bit more in the game, let him go downhill, use his size, use his athleticism. But again, it was just a failed effort by the Sixers. This was their best year to win the championship. Joel Embiid is not getting any younger. He continues to be injury prone. You have a lot of questions in Philadelphia, Mr. Kumar. The city is growing restless because you went through the whole process and you're not really getting any fruits from that. You haven't been out of the second round, Mr. Kumar. It's 3 straight. You lost to the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors on that crazy game-winning shot by Kawhi, and in this series, So, Magic Johnson on First Take said Ben Simmons needs a fresh start. It's time to trade him. I would love to see him in a Spurs uniform, but hey, you never know what's going to happen, Mr. Kumar. But so, are you ready to move on to the Nets blame game, or do you have any
Yeah.
last points?
I think we were just going to show the audience poll because we did an audience poll on who's to blame for the 76ers loss. I don't know if
So yeah, it was Ben Simmons. The majority, they showed a little bit earlier when Mr. Kumar was talking. Majority audience thinks it is Ben Simmons to blame, for the Sixers loss. So, hey, we'll see. A lot of questions left, for the Sixers this offseason. But now our next section in the blame game is the Brooklyn Nets. And I know Mr. Kumar has a lot of points he wants to talk about in this section. Let's see, what he's going to say. But again, the Nets, had championship aspirations. They lost in Game 7 to the Milwaukee Bucks at home, Mr. Kumar. So who do you blame, for this Brooklyn Nets loss? And it can be multiple people.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna do a turnaround and ask you that question first, and let you answer it, and then I will go at it after you.
All right. So I blame 80% on injuries, 10% on Steve Nash, and 10% on Joe Harris. The injuries, yes, you don't want to make excuses, but it's the reality of the fact. Kyrie Irving got hurt in Game 4. James Harden, 43 seconds into the series, pulled a hammy. He was never the same. He even had to rush to get back. You could just tell James Harden wasn't the same player. Kyrie Irving, you missed his ball handling ability because Kevin Durant had to initiate the offense and play make for everybody else rather than, having the ball in the right spots, and passes from Kyrie Irving. Then the role players, Joe Harris really struggled. Like I said earlier, he just missed key shots, down the stretch. Game 5, the Nets won despite of Joe Harris. Game 6, we were even saying on the watch party he was a no-show. It got so bad where the one shot that he made in Game 6 didn't count. It was a shot clock violation, and I just lost it on the watch party. It was just like, of course that would happen. And then Game 7, Joe Harris struggled. And then Steve Nash. I don't think he put enough of an emphasis on defense, Mr. Kumar. I think he was all about offense. He didn't, put Kevin Durant enough pick and rolls. I thought he could have involved, Blake Griffin a little bit more, inside. I thought he could have played Nicholas Claxton a little bit more when Lopez was really dominating the paint. He could have played Jeff Green more minutes after Game 5. So again, quickly, 80% injuries, 10% Steve Nash, 10% Joe Harris. I'm curious to what your percentages are, Mr. Kumar.
I don't have a percentage. I'm going to point a finger at only one person, and that's Sean Marks, the general manager of the team. Maybe you might be surprised by my choice, but you have the two best players, two of the best players in the league when you signed in, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Of course, Kevin Durant wasn't there last season as well, only Kyrie Irving. And you also traded most of your assets, to get in James Harden. And, any general manager would love to do that because you're getting now 3 of the top 10 players in the league currently, We had question marks on Kevin Durant, whether he would return back to his 100%. But he showed that he's more than 100%.
Yeah.
You always had question marks on Kyrie Irving and James Harden in the postseasons, because in the last 5 years, James Harden has not been such a great postseason player. Kyrie Irving has been a no-show in postseasons in almost 3 of the last 5 seasons. Um, and you pretty much had no role players on your bench in order to support these three. I know offensively they were extremely strong, and you know uh, on books they were probably the best team, and they were the team to beat. And the biggest mistake he also did was hire a novice, a rookie coach in Steve Nash. I
Mm.
think you had a lot of choices, and I think it would have been better served if he had gone for a little bit of an experienced coach. And then, of course, the injuries. Nobody can predict those injuries, but at the same time, there were times when all three were, fit enough to play, but they still elected not to play. So
Yeah.
playing only 7 games. So the reason I blame Sean Marks is because all the moves he made were not to support the team, but too much dependence on three players, two of them who have had histories in injury. So it was but natural that you have a lot of emphasis on these three players, and it just got to them at the end during the playoffs. So Sean Marks, you just need to do a better job of having surrounding at least a little bit better role players. You can have Mike Jones or Claxton or Tyler Johnson and those kind of
Yeah.
players, because these players cannot perform for you, in a pressure situation, because they have never ever been put into that situation.
I'm not going to lie, ladies and gentlemen. I did not expect that answer from Mr. Kumar. I thought when he said the one person to blame, I thought he was going to say Kevin Durant as a LeBron fan. I was expected it, but hey, that was a very objective answer, Mr. Kumar, and great analysis. I think you made a lot of great points that I agree with. You didn't have enough shooters. Surrounding these guys and defenders. Think about it. Who's your best defenders on the bench? Was it what, Jeff Green? You didn't have enough defensive players knowing that you're going to be this potent offensively. So I think that's true. Sean Marks needs to bear some blame, and this is going to be a big offseason for him. So I think you made some very valid points, Mr. Kumar.
I think the news is that one of the assistant coaches from the Brooklyn Nets, he gets hired as the coach of the Boston Celtics. And the other mistake Sean Marks did was, hire Mike D'Antoni as an assistant coach, who's also very offensive minded coach.
Yeah.
He's never been a defensive minded coach. I know he's worked with Steve Nash before, when he was coaching the Phoenix Suns. But I think their defense improved in the postseason for sure. But
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, but I think they'll have to break the bank a little bit to get a little bit of decent role players to come in next season.
I think I have to push back on you a little bit, Mr. Kumar. Yes, the Mac D'Antoni hire wasn't great, but you already had two defensive coaches. Jock Vaughn, who, by the way, I thought they should have hired him as a full-time coach back because he led the Nets to a bubble run. With Karis LeVert. They were very competitive. They almost beat the Blazers and Ime Udoka. So those were your two defensive coaches. But hey, you have Mike D'Antoni there, who's offensive minded. But hey, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Going forward. But are you ready to introduce? Well, okay. Before we get to our next section, let's talk about the poll question: who's to blame for the Nets' losses? It looks like the majority of the audience thinks it is the injuries, which is valid, but still, there's other factors. I'm saying that as a Nets fan, Mr. Kumar. There was other reasons besides the injuries that the Nets lost, but the injuries played a big part, in this series. So, are you ready to introduce our next section, Mr. Kumar?
Oh, yes. I'm going to wear my boxing gloves and do the Mahayuddh with Mr. Patel.
All right. Welcome to the Mahayuddh section, the great war between me and Mr. Kumar. We're going to go back and forth. It's going to get a little heated here. But Mr. Kumar, what are we going to be talking about in this section?
Well, it's my favorite topic, a comparison between Kevin Durant and LeBron James on the aspect of getting blamed for the loss. You know, I think, I don't think it's the same because when the Lakers lost to the Phoenix Suns, of course, the Lakers were also dogged with a lot of injuries, especially with Anthony Davis,
True.
Dennis Schroeder as well. I mean, everybody blamed LeBron James because he didn't elevate his game and started scoring 50 points like Kevin Durant. But nobody, I mean, we just saw just a while back, the audience thought the injuries were to blame for the Nets loss. Nobody ever thought to say, hey, it's Kevin Durant. But when it comes to LeBron James, hey, I mean, he's LeBron James. He just got to be the Superman. And if the Lakers lose, it's all on LeBron James. And that's how the world goes, and that's how the media goes, and that's how the public goes as well.
Well, okay, you make some good points about that, but okay, the difference is that in that game 6 against the Phoenix Suns, what did LeBron score? Like what, 22 points with something like 20 something points, I think, in that series. I don't know if we know the exact amount, but
I think he had 26, 9 assists and 9 rebounds or something like that. Yeah.
so basically almost had a triple double in that closeout game, But Kevin Durant in his closeout game in game 5 and game 7, particularly in game 7, he had 49 points. So I think Kevin Durant doesn't get the blame because he scored 49 points. You could just see he was tired. It was just Kevin Durant or bust, Mr. Kumar. It was basically 1-on-5. Kevin Durant was the entire Nets team against the five Milwaukee Bucks players. So I think Kevin Durant was a solo, and he still scored 49 points compared to LeBron, only scoring like 26 points. And you could see Kevin Durant was doing everything he can to lead the Nets to victory. And at that time, with the Lakers, they just had better role players, Mr. Kumar. They had KCP and Caruso and Kuzma. So I think they had better role players than a hobbled James Harden. So I think that's why Kevin Durant doesn't get the blame, because he scored 49 points in that closeout game compared to only 26 points by LeBron James.
Well, I mean, we have another LeBron supporter in our audience, Prashant Yamkar, who thinks LeBron James is a complete
I
team player.
disagree, but go ahead. Kevin Durant,
Okay.
Mr. Kumar, you saw he can pass the ball, not at LeBron's level. He's not the passer that LeBron is, but he can dish it out, Mr. Kumar. He has been able to assist the ball, so I disagree with that, Prashant. But go ahead, Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, the problem is, I'll give you an example. In 2017, I think, LeBron was playing against KD in the finals. It was game 1, I believe, and of course, LeBron carried a Kyrie-less team to the finals
Mm-hmm.
with a supporting cast of J.R. Smith, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, and other role players. And I think he scored about 51 points in that game 1, and the Cleveland Cavaliers still lost that game, if I'm not mistaken. And still, everybody blamed LeBron James because what happens is if he takes too many shots, it's like, hey, I mean, he's playing all alone. If he chooses to pass the ball like he always does, it says, hey, he should be taking the shots himself. The problem is whatever LeBron does is the opposite of what the people would say. I mean, he did the same thing against the Phoenix Suns. Unfortunately, I mean, the shooting of the Lakers was so bad during that series. I think I believe they shot like 26 or 27% from three, and they had more open 3-point opportunities, and there were a lot of them facilitated by LeBron James. So 50% more they would have got to about 34, 35%, and it could have been a better series for the Lakers. But again, the blame is going to be on
No,
LeBron. Hey, why did he pass the
no,
ball? He knows that he's
no.
not surrounded by shooters.
Mr. Kumar, okay, by the way, okay, if you want to talk about LeBron doesn't have the supporting cast in that series, what did Kevin Durant had? A Joe Harris that shot 24% from three, a Blake Griffin that was old and washed up, practically didn't do anything, a Jeff Green that struggled, a Landry Shamet that struggled, a James Harden on one leg. It went to a point where I cringed every time James Harden shot the ball. I did not want him to shoot the ball, Mr. Kumar. So Kevin Durant had that same supporting cast, but he uplifted them and kept them in the game because of his scoring prowess. I want to go back to that. You talked about that Warriors Cavs series, right? I believe you were talking about game one, right? In that series when LeBron had 51 points. Well, LeBron got the blame because he had Steph Curry on him on a switch, Mr. Kumar. And instead of pulling up and shooting on Steph Curry, he's been hot all game, making a lot of three-point shots. He passes it to George Hill, who gets fouled and misses one free throw and makes the other. LeBron should have shot that ball. Kevin Durant would have shot the ball. And I believe if LeBron shot that ball, he would have made that shot. So I think that's why he got the blame. In that situation, if you're a superstar, you want to shoot that ball rather than giving it to George Hill.
Uh, I mean, I don't think it's the same kind of equation. I know we're not really talking about team comparisons here. What we're talking about is, how does the media or people perceive, after a series loss, whether the blame should be more on Kevin Durant, the blame should be more on LeBron James. The team didn't perform well in both the cases.
Mm-hmm.
The same with Brooklyn Nets because they were shorthanded by injuries. The same was the case with Lakers. With injuries as well to Anthony Davis. But I totally agree with the fact that Kevin Durant had superlative performances in Game 5 as well as in Game 7. But when you go out there, it's like injuries were the problem for the Nets, whereas the injuries were never a problem for the Lakers.
No, I heard
I mean,
people.
that's how. I mean, that's how. I
Oh,
mean, it's perceived as, and going on to blame LeBron James because he didn't elevate his game and score 50 points in that game. He should have dominated the Phoenix Suns by going out there
exactly.
and scoring 50 points.
Exactly. Kevin Durant had a harder opponent in the second round.
And he himself has told you before the start of the postseason that he's not 100% either.
He was, but Kevin Durant, he scored 50 points against a better team. LeBron, struggled against the Phoenix Suns, but I didn't hear the blame, Mr. Kumar. I heard people acknowledge that, okay, yeah, the Lakers were injured, so he shouldn't get as much blame. I don't see people like criticizing LeBron. People acknowledge that without Anthony Davis, it's hard to win in the NBA without a second, with the second co-star. So I don't think people were blaming LeBron as much. But Prashant is saying KD had the best supporting cast at Golden State. Still, he was never a complete team player. I disagree again, Prashant. He was feeding it to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, but he had to be aggressive because he was the best player on that Golden State Warriors team. Remember, Mr. Kumar, after LeBron came back from them on 3-1, Draymond Green came crying in the parking lot. Oh, Kevin, please join me. Kevin, please come save us, Kevin. They knew that they couldn't win without Kevin Durant. So that's why he had to be the leading scorer, but he was still a team player. That's where he learned to be a team player, Mr. Kumar. And then another point I want to make was those Kevin Durant and OKC years, Mr. Kumar, when they blew that 3-1 deficit, Kevin Durant was putting up great stats, but people still blamed him for when they lost. Oh, Kevin Durant's putting up empty calories. So he did get the blame when he was putting up these great stats and when they were losing to the Golden State Warriors and they blew that 3-1 lead.
Man, I don't know how the roof would have blown if it was LeBron James in place of Kevin Durant taking that last shot and airball it. I think people would have blamed him to say,
He was
"Hey,
tired. He was
LeBron
tired.
James, you scored 48 points. You were tired, but that's
No.
okay. You got to make that basket and win the
Uh,
game. That's your job. That's how the next day's headlines would have been."
Mr. Kumar, he made the game tying shot in overtime. So you saw he's the reason that the Nets were in that overtime with that shot. You saw that he was tired. You saw that he was running out of gas, Mr. Kumar. And it was you even said it earlier. Steve Nash didn't call a timeout. James Harden was supposed to take that shot. Kevin was not expecting that ball to get the ball back from James Harden. So it was it was just a throw up shot because the time was going out, Mr. Kumar. We need some context for that shot.
So let's agree to disagree and
We're
move
never going
on
to agree
to
on that.
another section because I don't. I think we can go on for a whole week till next Thursday, 7 p.m., and we'll be still going at it in terms of who gets the more blame, whether it's KD or whether it's LeBron. But one thing I gotta agree with you is that Kevin Durant was sensational in that series, and he's laid rest to all doubts about how his comeback would be, and he's also committed to the United States roster
Yeah.
for the Olympics. And we have a great roster to Kevin Durant, and I think we're going to see reemergence of LeBron James next season, and I have that hope.
Yeah, no, I want to see that. I want to see the reemergence of LeBron James. I want to see Kevin Durant and LeBron duel out in the finals. They'll settle this debate once and for all. And Prashant, he's still going. That if LeBron was in KD's situation right now, he would have had 7 to 8 rings. Hey, it's hard to debut that point, or debunk that point. Kevin Durant did join the super team, but he was the best player on that super team. But that is another conversation for another day, Mr. Kumar. As we're getting ready to close the show, one more segment we have. So the lottery took place, Mr. Kumar. Last night, the Detroit Pistons got the #1 overall pick. The Houston Rockets were #2. The Cavs were #3. The Raptors were 4, and the Magic at 5. Oh no, 5. No, before that, actually, excuse me. Let's talk about.
Actually, just go about with the lottery, and then we will close the show with the stat attack.
Yeah. So we will close the show with the stat attack. But the lottery, Mr. Kumar, the Pistons getting the #1 pick and get the right, most likely, to draft Cade Cunningham.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, that's what the expectation is. But I think Orlando Magic has a couple of picks on 5 and 8. Golden State Warriors has 2 picks with the 7 and 14. And there's also speculation that the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are going to be picking 6, they may trade that pick in terms of for Kemba Walker or something like that. With Kemba Walker in combination, because he got traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I think it's an interesting draft. I think a huge opportunity for a rebuild team like Orlando Magic, who have 2 picks within the first 10, and with Golden State as well. I mean, they're going to get Klay Thompson back. So Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, James Wiseman, who was the #2 pick last season, and 2 top 15 picks this season. So it could be a great lottery for the Golden State Warriors.
I personally think that they're going to trade one of those picks, try to get another bona fide, great player, maybe a great defender, maybe another shooter. But we'll see, Mr. Kumar. Yeah, the Magic and the Warriors both have 2 top 15 picks. The Rockets, who had a great chance to get #1, but they're going to be picking at #2 as they try to rebuild from the post-James Harden era. But before we close the show, Mr. Kumar, let's talk about another segment that we're going to be debuting, the Shivam Stat Attack. So let's show the graphic. All right, are you ready for this week's Shivam Stat Attack, Mr. Kumar?
Hey, don't attack me.
All right. So this week's stat attack is going to be, so in the Brooklyn Nets, Milwaukee Bucks, Game 7, Brooklyn and the Bucks and the Nets bench only combined for 5 field goal attempts. Yes, you heard that right. The bench only combined for 5 field goal attempts the entire game. The fewest of any playoff game since 1971. When you say the stars show out in the playoffs, well, that was true for this series. It was all the stars, the Chris Middletons, Drew Holiday's, Giannis's. And on the net side, it was Kevin Durant, Mr. Kumar. So what a credible stat.
Yeah, and I think that's also because you had James Harden, who sat out only for 39 seconds during that game. You had Kevin Durant playing all 53 minutes of that game. I think Giannis played 52 minutes. Chris Middleton played 52 minutes. So it was pretty much like the starting five, playing throughout, the game and the overtime. Uh, Man, I mean, and especially I think the other aspect was that the bench of the Brooklyn Nets didn't even have a single field goal attempt during that entire game, if I'm not right.
Yeah, it was crazy. You usually think that the others, you win playoff game with the role players. Well, it was completely the stars. Like Mr. Kumar said, they played the entire game, and it was the stars that really showed out in the bright lights of New York. And the Buck stars, unfortunately, were a little bit better than the Brooklyn Nets stars, and that's why the Bucks were able to win this game 7. So yeah, these are our new segments, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. The blame game we're only going to do after the end of the series. So after the conference finals, we're going to debut the blame game again. But the Mahayud, that's going to be every week. And then the Shivam stat attack, that's going to be every week too. So isn't this exciting, Mr. Kumar? We have a couple, new segments that we're adding to the show.
Yeah, of course. I got to be ready with my boxing gloves every time now.
Exactly. So thank you everybody so much again for watching. Remember to connect with us at Patel and Kumar on Twitter and Instagram. You can watch the show live and on demand on the Ekalavyas YouTube channel and the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel.
Absolutely. So again, join us every Thursday, 7 p.m. until otherwise we mentioned that we're going to come with a live watch party if it's an interesting game. But nevertheless, we may see you back on Thursday, 7 p.m. India time with the recap of the conference finals. And you never know, we may have an interesting guest as well. So
Yeah.
tune in to the Eklavya Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channels, but make sure you subscribe to all our channels as well as on YouTube. Till then, we hope to see you back next week.
Yep. Peace.